Hello, everyone. Welcome back to our latest episode of the Science and Stuff podcast. I'm your host, Ethan Vargas, my co-host here, Labuda. How you doing?
Good, as always.
And then our out of this world moderator, Mr. Augustinski.
I want to be in this world.
Well, I just thought it was fitting for the topic of today's episode, which is rockets and aviation. And so our guests that we have today, two of them are from the Aviation Club. One of them is just a friend of ours that took physics last year, taking AP Physics 2, who's really involved in this topic. And the two from the Aviation Club are David Christie. How you doing, David?
Good. How are you guys doing?
That's great. I'm good too. And then our other guest is Jack Dennis. How you doing, Jack?
Doing great. How are you guys?
We're great as well. And then our third guest is Alessandro Mordashevitz. How you doing, Ale?
I'm doing absolutely phenomenal, thanks.
That's fantastic. So the topic, or the main revolving point of this episode is the Aviation Club. You guys made a rocket, correct? And demonstrated it like last semester. Is that correct?
Yeah, so last semester we all built our own small little rockets, and we went out and launched them. We got video of that. So I don't know, Jack, do you know where that video's at? Do you have that, or Miss Thomas might have that?
I might have a few video clips we could send in on my phone.
Yeah. So we had like 5 rockets, I think, that we launched, and it was yeah, we put them together and stuff. Pretty easy to do as well. We just, what was it, like cardstock and engines that you could buy from like a hobby shop. So
Yeah, we each made our own and tried some different things out, and it worked out pretty good. We had some major successes, some little issues, but it all turned out well.
What kind of different things did you try?
We tried a bunch of different things. A lot of people tried different sizes, different amounts of fins and spacing of fins and shapes of fins. David was one who didn't put a parachute in his, so that was kind of interesting. We just had a bunch of little design changes. Overall, they were pretty similar, but it was kind of cool to see how they differed in flight.
How long did it take you guys to make the rockets?
it took us around like probably 2-3 meetings just to fold up the fuselage, you could say, and then get everything glued on, and then launch day probably included in those 3 days. So
That's pretty cool. Like what size or parameters of the rockets worked most efficiently or effectively for maybe like height and maybe like, yeah, I guess just height really.
We found that a lot of them, we used hot glue to put them together. Probably wasn't the best idea since hot glue could be pretty heavy. But we found out that the ones usually with the least weight in general obviously flew the best, even if it was a larger rocket. Like David's flew pretty well, probably because it didn't have a parachute, but then it came down kind of violently. But yeah, we found out the less weight and the lines, they kind of flew the highest.
That's pretty interesting. Ale, do you have any idea maybe why the less fins maybe led to a greater boost or efficiency of the rocket?
Yeah, so I play some video games. Also, I just do this stuff for fun. So I know about TWR, thrust to weight ratio. So generally, if you're on some fighter jets, like the F-22, F-35, you want to that's this is very general, but maybe for commercial airlines, that isn't that important. You're trying to just get as much space as possible. You're trying to get it doesn't really matter speed. You're just trying to get as much people possible. You're trying to earn the most money. And that thrust to weight ratio in more fighter jets, you're trying to go really fast. They try to keep it as light as possible. And also the missiles maybe they're trying to carry or whatever they're trying to carry, that's also important. So yeah, it's a thrust to weight ratio that maybe they had a pretty good ratio that allowed them to get higher. And yeah, that's basically it.
That's really interesting. So for the Aviation Club, Jack and David, did you guys like try to if your rocket kind of was not working as much as you wanted to, did you ever make adjustments like during the time you were shooting them off, or like did you use calculations while building them to find out exactly if it'll work?
Yeah, so pretty much all of them launched, I think. Right, Jack? I think there was like one or something that didn't really the engine or something blew through. But
Yeah, there was one that didn't quite get off the ground, but otherwise,
yeah. So they all got in the air, and some of them, mine didn't wasn't really launchable again because there was no parachute, which although it launched higher, it did not come down in a relaunchable form. So we didn't really make many adjustments.
Yeah. Did you just forget to put a parachute in, or did you just not think it was necessary?
No, I
Was-
just wanted to see what would happen if I didn't put the parachute in, on a smaller scale. Obviously, it's not going to cause any damage, but it just ended up sticking in the lawn. So the nose was all crumpled up.
that's pretty funny. And like, so yeah, that makes a lot of sense with what Ali said too. Like had less weight, so it's thrust to weight ratio helped it go even higher than before, and that's pretty interesting and good. What kind of so for the rockets, did you ever you're just trying to go straight up, right? Or did you kind of factor in the wind when you're trying to perform calculations, or maybe on the day that you shot them off?
for the most part, we were trying to go straight up, but we did have to end up aiming the rockets into the wind a little bit because it was a kind of windy day. So the ones that did have parachutes would kind of drift further away, and we didn't want to lose them off school property or have them go in someone's yard or on their house. So we did have to kind of tilt it into the wind, but that wasn't a huge factor, especially for the ones like David's that didn't have parachutes because they just went straight down. But yeah, the wind we did have to factor in a little bit because it did end up being kind of breezy that day.
Gentlemen, if I can jump in at this point, real quick question, and my apologies if I missed this at the beginning. Do we know how high the rockets went?
We don't have an exact height because those things are too small to put an altimeter on. They're pretty tiny. But usually looking at the weight charts for those engines, we could assume they went 400 feet.
Okay, I'll take approximation. That's fine. Do we know the way that we can actually estimate how high the rocket goes? This is old school.
There's obviously some trig you could do to figure it out. But then there's also now devices they sell, but like I said, you can't really plug those in to a rocket the size we did. Maybe we'll do some bigger ones in the spring. We're hoping to get another launch in one of these days, but we weren't able to get actual trackers. So the only way to do it would be if someone did the trig.
Right. And so you do the trig then. Why didn't you do the trig?
I'm not in trig yet. I'm not sure if David is, but yeah, I don't know trig yet.
David, I know that you know trig. Unmute yourself and speak for yourself, sir.
Oh, we were just in the moment watching the rockets go up, going back to back off of them. So we didn't really think of that in the moment.
Unbelievable. All right, I'll let it slide. But in the future, I don't need these approximations. If you can't put an altimeter on it, you can do the trig.
Next launch for sure, we'll get
Oh,
the exact
sure. Yep.
altitude.
I will mute myself now and stop asking you about trig. But it's a bad sign. Just to continue with Mr. Agasinski's bad physics puns. Sorry for the tangent.
So for you guys' next launch, are you gonna do anything else different besides like you said, having a bigger rocket?
Also, David, are you gonna put a parachute on next time?
Probably, or who knows? Maybe I'll test out the bigger rocket without a parachute and see what happens in a larger scale. Might not be a good idea, but who knows?
Please don't do that.
Sorry, I think I just didn't like understand if you said, but how did you like fire the rockets off? I know you said you had cheap motors from, I think, a hardware store, or maybe I forgot what you said, but like how did that work exactly?
We had a launch pad. I have a launch pad. I did some model rocket stuff. I have some bigger ones at home. We were going to launch one, but I forgot the fuse for the motor. So we weren't able to fire that one off, but we used my launch pad. We used actually plastic straws. I have one in my hand right now. We cut them up and glued them on, and there's a little rod on the launch pad. So you just slide it over the rod. Once it clears the rod, kind of like a launch pad at NASA, it'll get off the ground and kind of guide its way so it doesn't go sideways or anything, because if it tips over, that wouldn't be good. So the rod kind of stops that. But then we had a electronic remote. You press a button and it lights a electronic fuse.
That's really cool, and very intuitive. Did I know some people might have done some research? Did like anybody find anything they want to talk about specifically? Maybe like a last little segment, maybe about experimental design or rockets of airplanes or anything like that, or just anything to talk about.
Well, something in the news I saw is the SpaceX rocket is going to crash into the moon on I think it is, let me see, March 4th. It's going to crash into the moon. So that's going to be pretty interesting.
That's not planned, is it? That's accidental, right?
Yeah, yeah, that's accidental. There was some like miscalculation, I think, or there was like, yeah, there was something went wrong, obviously, but
That's pretty alarming. Ali, did you have something?
Yeah, well, it looks like for that they didn't do the trig, Mr. Og. So, for SpaceX, that's kind of bad. But yeah, I was kind of thinking, I saw an advertisement the other day that looks like United are looking to, they're like investing and researching, like kind of like the rebirth of commercial supersonic flight. So, like, for those who don't know, like the Concorde way back in the day, maybe you've heard of it. It was kind of what started the whole, like, we hate airplanes, they're so loud. So, supersonic basically can cut down. I'm pretty sure a flight from like New York to London is like 7 hours generally. Cut it down to like 2.5 or 3. So it's definitely, very, although it is very expensive. But I just saw that United the other day where they're looking to try and rebirth that. So that's pretty cool, pretty exciting for the future of aviation, commercial aviation. So yeah.
In the article, did they say anything about like the issues that were with like the Concorde, like how they're gonna fix them, or did they not go that deep yet?
Well, so like the Concorde, the big issue why it was taken down is basically it uses a lot of fuel. It has to use a lot of fuel. It has to go. It goes really fast like that. But also like the noise is a big problem. Like people, that's where there's like protests starting. Like they're so loud. It kind of like it's like disruptive. People just don't like super loud noises, obviously. And also like they did do like on the Concorde itself some innovations like the nose had to be pointed a certain way during takeoff and landing, so it wouldn't like just so it would take off properly. So they had the pointed nose technique. They would put that down because it was the pilots needed to see, and it needed to be a certain way in flight for like the supersonic thing to work. So that's something they did. But United, I don't know. I saw a picture of it and it looked pretty similar to the Concorde. So I guess I'm excited. But I'm also not sure how soon that might be, if it maybe at all. But so, yeah.
So how long ago was the Concorde like a problem? And like also for the protesters, was it like people just like living on the ground who didn't want to hear above their heads, or was it too loud for like passengers or something?
Well, so it was used mainly. It was like very expensive to go on. It was only used for like the super rich people, and I guess like it was. I'm pretty sure one of them was like kind of a private jet for somebody. But so basically, yeah, it was like the people around the airport. Like it didn't happen in O'Hare, but like it would be like the people living around O'Hare. They'd be hearing these huge noises from the engines, and this was, I'm pretty sure, like the 1990s, like late 1990s and like early 2000s was when it was. And I'm pretty sure the last one was around, they officially like were not in use after like 2004 or 5 or something like that. So.
Yeah, that's really interesting. It'd be pretty cool that maybe if they can bring down the sun levels too, and then it's not as much of a problem for everybody. Does anybody have any anything closing to say about airplanes and rockets or anything? No? Okay. Well, thank you, Ale, Jack, and David coming on the podcast. It was great having you guys and great partnering with the Aviation Club. And so thank you, everybody, and we'll see you YZs later.